Thank you, and welcome back to the Patriots 300 Level Podcast. My name's Kevin, and I'm joined with my co-host, Eric. Welcome back after a several-month hiatus for a 30-second episode this week, where we're previewing the Patriots as they head into training camp, look at some intriguing position battles, and discuss news around the NFL. As a reminder, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Pat's 300 Level Pod, at Pat's 300 Level Pod, for up-to-the-minute updates, any commentary on news of the day. And then just to give you guys a heads up, Eric's audio may not be the greatest today, just he's traveling, doesn't have his actual mic with him. So we're still going to battle through and it just may be a little bit more choppy than usual. So I just want to give everyone a heads up on there. So one of the first things we want to get into, Eric, would just be the most intriguing battles to watch is training camp. Training camp starting tomorrow. This podcast may be up when it's up, and maybe today when you're listening, maybe the next day. And I'll be heading down just to watch to see what's going on over at least a couple of times to see how everything's looking. So what we're kind of looking forward to in this training camp are what some of the intriguing battles to watch. What would you say your most intriguing ones that if you were going to stay in Rhode Island and go up to training camp, what would be the ones you're looking forward to most?
For me, I think the biggest intrigue in general this whole training camp and preseason is going to be the cornerback position, where that was late in the season, especially against the Bills, and in the regular season and the playoffs, was you were just getting torched and you lost your number one cornerback in J.C. Jackson. And they added a couple of pieces in free agency, Malcolm Butler, who had the year off last year, Terrence Mitchell. They got Jack Jones and Marcus Jones in the third and fourth round in this past draft, but they weren't high-end first-round draft picks. So you don't really have that number one or maybe even number two cornerback. So I'm very intrigued to see how that battle goes, where you might have some very good 2, 3, 4 cornerbacks, but who's going to battle out? Who's going to end up being the starting cornerback? Is it going to be Malcolm Butler and Terrence Mitchell? Is it going to be Jalen Mills? There's some reports that Jack Jones might make his way up there. Is it going to be Jonathan Jones, who's arguably your most dependable cornerback? So very interested to see and very intrigued to see how that goes about. And you have, like I said, there's 6, 7, 8 cornerbacks that are pretty good quality. That you might not have that top end depth, but I don't think you can carry all those cornerbacks into the season. So of that list, who's not going to make the team?
Yep, I completely agree. I think it's going to be really interesting to see who kind of emerges with that. Like you said, they've got pretty good depth there. They've got not really A pieces, but you got a lot of B's and C's, and who's really going to make the team, who's going to stand out. Is that year off going to really hurt Malcolm Butler? He wasn't really too sought after, even the last year when he signed with the Cardinals, off of his 2020 tape with Tennessee. So how is he going to fare? Are his legs still with it? How's that going to look? But I think the really most important thing is you can really get away with those corners. Like we've said, we think we're going to see a lot of different zone schemes, a lot of different 3 safety schemes, but that's not going to work if your pass rush isn't up to par. So the things I'm most excited to really see is really what that edge and what the linebacker play is going to look like. We've seen them get away from the prototypical Patriot linebacker. Hightower's gone. Collins is gone. Calvin Noy is gone. And now you have that more athletic, speedier linebacker. And are they going to stick with it? Or is it going to be really Bentley playing and everyone else kind of being like a backup sort of situation? So if they're able to get the pressure, like we've said, you don't really need that top tier cornerback because the quarterback has less time to throw the ball. So how are they going to get that pressure? Are they going to have any edge linebackers that can actually set the edge, and that way Belichick trusts them, so that way they can be a 3-down linebacker? Those are really the 2 most important positions that I'm actually looking for, just because there's such new faces with those different linebackers that we have, a lot of familiar names, but a lot of people that really need to stand out this year who have sat a year or 2 on the bench or have had some injuries.
No, I think that's a very good point, where I think cornerback is the most intriguing aspect, but I think a lot of Patriot fans going into the offseason, thought one of the number one needs was also linebacker, where you were just exposed for being too slow. And they didn't really go out and get too many people. But as you and I have said numerous times, especially our offseason podcast episodes, is you might not need to you might have those pieces in-house where you have some young, fast linebackers with McGrone, who missed most of the year or all the year last year. You have McMillan, who got hurt in training camp, who they were very high on. They traded for Mac Wilson, who's fast. You have Josh Uche, Jennings, who hasn't really played up to his potential yet, but maybe he's someone that they feel high on and he might be able to emerge. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see from the linebacker position overall. But I do agree. I think that second pass rusher is going to be huge for them. Where last year you're able to, for 2/3 of the season, you had Matthew Judon, who was one of the best defenders in the NFL. And you were also able to get pressure from Christian Barmore. But teams were able to double that side, and then Judon fell off in the second half. So where else are you going to get pass rush from? Either if Judon's being double, triple teamed, or he's hurt or something else, you need another player. And I'm really hoping that's Josh Uche, but that's what I'm interested to see. He had a great training camp preseason first 2 games last year until his injury. And then we don't know what really happened after that, but I want to see if he's able to build on the hopes that we had last year. And going into this year, I think he can be a very important player for this team.
Yep, 100% agree. What's your next kind of position battle that you're looking for?
I not really position. I guess it's just I'm very interested to see Nelson Aguilar versus Tyquan Thornton, because I feel that if Thornton is able to have a very good training camp and very good preseason, that Aguilar might be someone that they're going to be able to move on from either cutting and saving you about $5 million in cap space, or trading and saving about $10 million. And the Patriots only have about $1.5 million in cap space right now, I believe, somewhere around that. Mm-hmm. So I think that's just an interesting battle where they're two very similar type players. But also I think Aguilar, he's been practicing all offseason with Mac Jones. So I'm also interested to see, does their chemistry develop where Mac is able to hit Aguilar on those deep passes, which they weren't always in sync with last season. And that's something that can also elevate this offense.
Yeah. And again, like we were kind of saying with the cornerback position, we mentioned this on a couple of the different podcasts we're on over our break on various ones you can check out. We'll mention in the comment section. But they may not have that number one wide receiver, but they've got a lot of those depth pieces. They got a lot of those B's, those C's wide receivers. So they may not be heavy at the top, but they're very deep there. And they have a lot of wide receivers right now on the roster. I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, but the Patriots usually keep on average over the last 5 years, about 4.6 wide receivers. And they've got way more than that right now. So it's going to be interesting to see who kind of narrows down how they whittle down that. Is Jacoby Myers going to be the one that may be traded because he's on a relatively cheap deal? I don't really know if a team's going to really want him, just based on he doesn't get that separation. He's probably more valuable to the Patriots than he is to someone else. But again, Nelson Aguilar, I think that's everyone's biggest one. If Tyquan Thornton is able to show that he's ready and he's able to start, then Aguilar would definitely be on the chopping block just because of that salary. And he's only here for this year. And I would say every other position, just to be interested to see how Parker does. Does Trey Nixon take that next step like he did in minicamp? So it'd be a really interesting kind of position battle to see between all of them. And then just the last one would just be running back. And we've said it all along. I love Damian Harris. I hope he stays here. Patriots don't usually value the running back, which I think we will all agree on. I would never give a running back a second contract unless it's a pretty good value. So it is all likelihood this is either Damian Harris's last year with the Patriots, or he's getting traded this training camp, or he may sign a team-friendly deal if maybe he realizes that maybe he doesn't have a great market out there. But they did draft 2 running backs. James White is back. I don't really see him sticking around, but there's some reports saying that he's having some issues with his hip still. And that's a really hard injury to come back, let alone at his age and at running back. But it'll just be interesting to see how these 2 rookie running backs kind of handle the competition. Is it something Damian Harris sticks around this season? I hope he does, just because I like him. JJ Taylor, is he out the door? He's been with the team a decent amount of time. They kind of gave up on him last year after that fumble in the Bucs game. And he hasn't really done much to kind of solidify himself on the team. He's very shifty, but he's really small. So it's just interesting to see what they'll do with all these different running backs they have. Also Ty Montgomery too, running back wide receiver kind of combo.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that's one thing I'm also interested in. I think this is a perfect way to just end the intriguing, just the discussion on this is that I want to see how Pierre Strong does. Like his college tape, he looks very good. He kind of reminds me of a young Damian Harris who's a little faster. But again, it was against lower competition, so it's going to be interesting to see how he fares against in the NFL defenses. But like you said, you drafted 2 running backs. Granted, Harris being a 6th round running back, there's no guarantee he makes the team. But you did devote 2 draft picks for running backs. You do have Harris and Stevenson, so maybe they end up moving on from Harris, which I really hope they don't, but we'll have to see. So that's why I want to see how Kevin Harris, as well as Pierre Strong, perform this training camp.
Yep, agree completely. Moving on, we did a segment every single episode last season on Mac Jones, and we're going to kind of continue this tradition going forward. Maybe not as much in the preseason until we get to the games, because I don't know so much we can really talk about each time, but we might keep it up every single episode, but definitely throughout the season. Probably one of the most impactful players that will need to have an impact this year, based on everything going on. We'll kind of get into this later on as well too. But what are your thoughts on Mac Jones going into year 2?
I'm very high on him. He had a really great rookie season for a quarterback, arguably one of the top 5 seasons for a rookie quarterback. So I know a lot of people in the media are saying, oh, he's already reached a ceiling, which I don't know how you can say that about someone who's only a rookie, who's only started 2 years in his career in college and the NFL. But you see him taking that leadership role for the team in general, but especially on the offense, where he's going to different places to meet with all his different receivers, to practice with them. And it's not even just with Jacoby Myers or Kendrick Bourne, who were some of his top receivers last year. He's going out of his way to practice with Trey Nixon this offseason. He's going out of his way to practice with Wilkerson, some players that might not make the team. So he's definitely setting the tone for this offense, and it seems like he's embracing that leadership role. Also, I don't know how big of an impact it'll be, but I think it might be at least slight, but maybe even more, is he has been practicing with Tom House, I believe Tom House, Tom Brady's throwing coach, and learning the mechanics and working on that. He's been getting stronger. He's been working with Aguilar on their deep ball passes. So I think having a full offseason, full training camp, preseason under his belt, where he knows he's going to be the starter, getting all those first team reps in the offseason, where last year he was second string. He didn't get all these reps with the players he was going to actually be throwing with. I think that's going to be very big for his development, and I see him taking a very big step forward this upcoming season. The last few years, we saw Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow take big steps from their rookie season in year 2. And they were some of the best quarterbacks in the NFL last year. I don't know if we'll see Mac take that big of a step, but if he takes anything anywhere close, the Patriots will at least be in contention this year.
Yeah, I think you've really hit on all the big points. There's not really too much for me to add. I think I'm just really excited to see what he do. That year 1 to year 2 jump is really important for a quarterback, and how is he going to handle it? Everything he's done this offseason looks like he's ready for the part. And then just again, to remember too, going into last year, it's really tough for a rookie because you have the draft preparation. Then you go right into rookie camp, and then you go into mini camp, and then you go into training camp, and you don't really have a break. So I think kind of that time off for Mac is going to really do him wonders. That way he won't be as worn down at the end of the year. He may not be as mentally fatigued. And I'm just really excited to see his body looks great. He looks in the best shape he's been probably ever. And how is he going to look this year? I'm just really excited, especially with kind of the year 2 players that they have and the new addition of Devontae Parker too. It should be really interesting. And I'm really high in Mac. I think, and we had said this before, he was easily a top 10 he was a top 15 quarterback last year. He should make the jump to be a top 10 quarterback this year. And then after this year, it wouldn't shock me if eventually he gets to be a top 5, anywhere from that 5 to 10. Wouldn't shock me if he ever got even higher than that. But I think all you're really looking for is really a top 10 quarterback because, like Belichick said, I'm pretty much a firm believer in this. You can win a Super Bowl assuming you have a top 15 quarterback. 49ers almost did it with Jimmy twice. If it wasn't for kind of Kyle Shanahan kind of crapping down his leg, and also Jimmy a little bit too, but it is possible. So I'm just really excited to see how Mac does this year. I'm a big believer in him, and I think he's an excellent talent. Moving on, 5 questions this time. Who's the player you're most excited to see in training camp?
It's kind of a tie between 3 players. I know I do this a lot. But on the offense, Pierce Strong, I just want to see how his college tape is really good. He looks like a faster Damian Harris. So I want to see how that transitions from a lower D1 level to the NFL. And then Devontae Parker on offense, I want to see his role in this offense. If he's able to stay healthy, is he able to be the Dolphin, like the receiver he was a couple years ago when Chad O'Shea, former Patriots coach, was his offensive coordinator. And then I'm very interested to see about McGrone, where we didn't really see much of him because he was hurt last training camp and preseason. So I want to see, I know that the Patriots are very high on him. I want to see how he fits in this defense. And is he able to be that player that initially coming out of college before the injury, he was projected to be a day 2 pick. And he ended up falling to the 5th round because of his injury. So those are the players I'm very excited to see.
My one may be a little bit more surprising. Mine would be Thornton, just because he's really fast. He didn't really show too much. He didn't really show too much in minicamp, and that's not really. I'm not really too surprised about that, just because a rookie in the Patriots system does take a little while to kind of get up to speed, even if they are kind of simplifying a few things. But just his speed, he's really fast, and just reminds me of Bethel Johnson years ago, where he really caught my eye in training camp back when we used to go with our dad years ago. And I'm just really kind of excited to see that speed again this year. So hopefully he'll make a bigger impact than Bethel did. Players to make a surprisingly big impact this year. Just let's do one. Well, who would be yours?
I'm going completely out of the box, and I wouldn't be shocked if he's not even on the team in a couple of weeks based on this draft class. But I'm going to go with Anthony Jennings.
Oh, I'm a little surprised with that. I don't really know if he's got the speed or the body type to actually play in the NFL right now. I think he's more of a
I feel that
from like 20 years ago.
I agree, but I feel like Bill still likes that style of linebacker, and since he's still on the team, mixed with the uncertainty at linebacker, even though there is a little depth, I feel that he's going to somehow, since there wasn't too many surprising players that, or all the other surprising ones have already been this was kind of one out of the blue. So I just went with him and I'm sticking with it.
Okay. I am going to go with, I'll say Jonnu Smith, and I don't have too much faith in him doing this, but there's more of a hope. Just because they got rid of the fullback, they're paying him $12.5 million this year. Yeah. They're gonna have to rely on Jonnu Smith. If he can't get anywhere close to the level of play that he was getting with Tennessee, their season might not be where we expect them to be. Yeah. So I think a lot of people, after seeing him last year, aren't really expecting too much of an impact. So I would say him close second run would be Shaun Wade, because a lot of people forget about him. He had a lot of he was really promising in college as a slot corner. He then decided he wanted to play outside corner because you get paid more. It was terrible, and then that just sunk him down to, I think it was a 5th round pick by the Ravens, and we traded for him last year. So if he can maybe have a really good slot play, and maybe they may move Jonathan Jones to a second corner, he could be really surprising there.
No, I do like the Wade pick. I didn't include Jonnu Smith because I am expecting him to have a big impact this season, so I don't find it surprising. But that's just my thought. But I know some Patriots fans might find it surprising based on how bad he was last year.
Yeah. Surprise cut or trade this year?
I think we alluded to it a little bit. Damian Harris and Nelson Aguilar or some, but I'm also still worried about Jonathan Jones. I love Jonathan Jones, especially now with Tyreek Hill being in the AFC East, and Jonathan Jones has done very well against Tyreek Hill, but I just think you have a lot of slot corners where you mentioned Wade. There's also Miles Bryant, who was okay at some points, but also wasn't great last year. But you also drafted Marcus Jones too. So there is a spot where, or potential where they don't think that Jonathan Jones is worth a $8 million salary where you could save $6 million if you cut him.
Yeah, that's a really fair point. Since we already said Damian Harris and Aguilar, I'm going to go with Lawrence Guy.
Yeah,
we both really like him a lot. He's a really strong front. Last year kind of had an off year. He started off really bad. Then he kind of settled in, and then down the stretch wasn't really the same. I hope it's not him declining. I hope it's just he's too much on him right at that point, and having just the offseason to rest. Maybe he was hurt. But if that's not the case, I wouldn't be shocked if he's gone. And I hate to see it because I really like Lawrence Guy. He's a great person too. Not only a great player, but a great person. So, but we'll have to see.
I think that's fair.
So this is one of your questions that you had. Of these former Patriots, will any of these Patriots actually join the team in camp or preseason? Hightower, Flowers, or Collins?
I say no. I want Trey Flowers, but if it hasn't come to fruition at this point, I don't think it will unless they just don't have the salary cap, so they can't sign him yet. Hightower is the only one I think might, just because if he wants to give it one last go and doesn't care about the money, but I think ultimately none of them come.
I agree. I don't think Hightower will do it for what they're going to want to pay him for what they want. I think he's got too much pride and he'd rather just sit home rather than getting paid either veteran minimum or a couple $1 million. Flowers, he did show some decline in the last couple of years. He was in Detroit though. So was it Detroit? Is it him? But if no one's really going after him yet, a lot of teams are probably thinking the same thing. And then Jamie Collins,
Patricia being his coach too in Detroit, where Patriots had the potential. Like he saw him more recently as well.
And then Jamie Collins, he showed last year. He's not the same player he was before. I wouldn't take him back even if he wanted to be back. So we both say no over there. All right. 5 most important things that need to go right this season for it to be a success. You can go first.
So I think number 1 is just health, which I think that's a given. But if the season, like we're talking about everything, what we're projecting, but if something happens to Mac Jones, for instance, or something happens to Matthew Judon or another very important player on the team, or you just rack up injuries like you did in 2015, towards the end of the season, there's nothing else you can do. So health is obviously the number 1 thing that has to go right. Number 2 is Mac Jones' development, him taking that next step from year 1 to year 2. So I think he's going to need to be the leader on offense, and he needs to take that next step where he was great last year as a rookie, but now he's had that experience. He has to now start to play like a veteran quarterback and elevate the Patriots when they need to. Number 3 is Jonnu Smith, who we talked about a little bit. They signed him to be as one of the most highest paid tight ends in the NFL. And he showed promise of it with the Tennessee Titans. He was young. I think when they signed him, he was only 25, or he's only 26 now. But he just didn't live up to expectations. I think that Saints game where he was horrendous just got in his head, where he was overthinking everything afterwards. But now that he has a full offseason under his belt, he's went to mini camp, he has another training camp, and then preseason. If he's able to learn this offense and get it under his belt, I think he is really the X factor in this offense, where if he plays up to his potential, and then you have him and Hunter Henry as tight ends over the middle, it's going to cause so many mismatches for the defense, and it's going to open up this offense. Number 4 is pass rush, which we alluded to earlier, where you're able to get it from Matthew Judon and Christian Barmore, but pretty much no one else. You need someone else to get that pass rush, especially with uncertainty in the secondary. And then last one is just Patriots secondary in general, where that's what really hurt you as the season went on, especially against the Bills in the regular season and the playoffs. Losing JC Jackson, you need the secondary to step up this year. We talked about it a little bit in our previous episodes, but we haven't talked about it yet today. Is just I'm very interested to see how this defense looks with potential four safety personnel on the field. And that's going to possibly, like you said earlier, maybe you're going to see a lot of zone. And then just since you're not used to seeing four safety personnel or even three safety personnel, is it going to throw off offenses, confuse quarterbacks, especially if you're just lining up safeties and cornerbacks all over the field where it's tougher for a quarterback to read the defense. So they have to play up to their potential. So that those are my 5 points.
All good points. A lot of them kind of overlap with me. Number one, Mac Jones. Obviously, if he doesn't perform the way that we're expecting to, if he doesn't take a leap, even if he doesn't take a leap, he might be fine. But he has to at least be the same as last year or take a leap. They're not going anywhere, so they need him to kind of bolster up some of their other players. They may not have the talent on really both sides that some other teams have, but they have a lot of depth. And is he able to kind of help elevate that depth on the offensive side? That's one important part. You've got all these kind of gunslinging teams. You got the Bills that can score a lot, the Chiefs that can score a lot, Chargers can score a lot. The Raiders are going to be able to score a lot. There's a ton of teams there's a ton of teams in the AFC are loaded right now. So you're going to have to keep up with all of them. Are you able to score points? You're not going to be able to win a game with 20 points every single week. You're going to need to be able to score in the mid to high 20s at least. And are they going to be able to do it? And that's going to be a lot on Mac Jones' shoulders. And then that leads me into the second point is just the offensive coaching staff. We kind of hit on this before, and it's kind of still been the same. There hasn't been too much really released. They did release the titles that didn't really show us really anything more than we heard before. But how is that going to be? I'm willing to give Bill the benefit of the doubt just because he's had all this experience. He knows all his players, and I think he's going to have a big hand in Mac's development like he did with Tom's. But at the end of the day, who's going to be calling plays? Who's going to have the ear of Mac? Who's going to be telling him on the sideline what adjustments he needs to make? I really hope that maybe Hoyer, maybe more of that word than the judges. I have more faith in Patricia than I do in Judge. Just because there was a lot of stuff that came out when Judge was wide receivers coach. A lot of players didn't really take to him there. He is kind of an ass. We saw with the Giants. At least Patricia was a decent defensive coach. Not all the players always liked his kind of passive style as coaching, but at least he does know that side. So I'd be more comfortable with him calling the plays than Judge. But Judge was also a quarterback. So I'm willing to give both of them the benefit of the doubt and see what happens this year. If it doesn't work out well, we could rip it afterwards and just see what happens there. Jonnu Smith on my list as well, or I mentioned him, I won't go over him again. Next one, Devon Godchow, or really the entire defensive line altogether, but really him. They didn't get anyone to really bolster up that defensive line. We mentioned this many times last year. They're getting run over. And if you get run over in first and second down, then you've got third and short. Then you can't bring out those amoeba style defenses, all those different trickeries. And it really kind of shortens how much of defensive calls that you have. So is Godchow going to take that next step forward like Danny Shelton did? Or is he not? And I'm a little worried he might not, just because the Dolphins play the same type of scheme and it's not like a scheme change that he was going into. So is it something where he was kind of content with the money he was making, or because I think this year is his contract year, is he going to try and really kind of outperform and show other people? So it's a lot riding on the shoulders there. And then just the last thing, the pass rush, like we had mentioned before, if they don't have that top cornerback, so they're going to really need that pass rush to hit home, get the quarterback, get him off rhythm. And they need someone other than Judon and Barmore, because if they could take away one or two of them, then they've got no one. So they really need someone stepping forward, like an Uche, like a Perkins, somebody to step forward there.
No, those are all great points. Just one thing I just want to hit on is I'm actually not too concerned about the offensive coaching. I know some people are, and it might be rightfully so, but we've seen this before where when Charlie Weiss left in 2004, we went to Josh McDaniels. Granted, he didn't have the title, but went from Charlie Weiss to McDaniels, who had no play calling experience. And then after McDaniels left after 2008, we went to Bill O'Brien, wasn't technically the offensive coordinator by title, but he was calling the plays, and he had no previous play calling experience. And both in 2005 and 2009, Patriots, they didn't finish the season great, but we didn't really see much of a hiccup in the offense, transitioning from an established offense coordinator to someone with no play calling experience. And then the difference now is, even though we're going from McDaniels, who's had a lot of experience, to potentially Matt Patricia or Joe Judge, even though they don't have any play calling experience per se, they were both head coaches who are in charge of the game plan for the overall team, and were essentially in charge of offensive game plan for their teams. So they have more experience with play calling per se than Josh McDaniels and Bill O'Brien did. So that's why I'm not too concerned. And then Bill, it all comes from Bill anyway. Bill's the one that's in charge of the entire offense, in charge of the entire team. So I think that there might be a little hiccups here and there, but I'm not as concerned as a lot of people are.
That's a fair point. Moving on, we're going to kind of start this here and there. This season would be our mailbag. So we're going to pick usually one or two kind of good questions that we got. We picked one this week from Patriots Feeder. And the question was, Bill Belichick has always been known for focus on and drafting well on defense. Has that focus now shifted? Our offensive depth is very good. Our D was running practice squad players in the playoffs. Does Bill think his coaching could shore up the D, and that the O is the most important investment now? I'll let you go first.
I think it is an interesting point that I hadn't really thought about, but they do have pretty good depth on offense, and especially last season, but even this season coming into it, you might not have the star wide receiver, star this and that, but the defensive depth is what killed them last year, especially when you're missing Jalen Mills, you're missing Jonathan Jones, and that's what their secondary got absolutely exposed, and why the Bills didn't punt for 2 games. So it is interesting. I think part of it was just availability of players they were able to get, mixed with the money it costs to get some players at certain positions. But I do think Bill is confident in, I think part of the reason why there might not be as much depth, or he didn't go after spend money on cornerbacks this year, is that he's confident in his ability, his staff's ability of coaching, as well as the players on the team. But it is definitely interesting, where in 2018, 2019, he was defensive heavy Tom was getting older, and that's how we won the Super Bowl in 2018, was defensive led, whereas this wasn't as much focus put into defense, you could say, this past couple of years. So I think it is an interesting point. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point too. I don't know if it was completely I think it was just a lack of depth based on kind of just player development that we've seen over the last couple of years, which has really hurt them in the playoffs last year and towards the end of the year last year. But he does have a pretty big year of Saban. We've heard the quote where Nick Saban says that defense is kind of dead now, and you have to be able to play offense and then worry about defense last. So is it something where usually we see college play catch up to the pros eventually? So is this something too where Bill is thinking that, hey, I need to kind of be ahead of the curve here. We need to focus more on offense and go from there. And maybe we can rely on our scheme and our coaching on defense. So it is an interesting part. I don't think this was completely intentional, what it was the last couple of years. I think it's more just kind of poor drafting. And we saw it. John Williams was a second round pick, and he stinks. And he's got that second round pick kiss of death of cornerbacks for the Patriots. So I don't think it was completely intentional. I think they have tried and missed. So, but very interesting point by Patriots Feeder. Moving on, news around the NFL really quickly. Baker Mayfield finally traded to the Panthers. It's interesting to see what they're going to do with this quarterback room. Baker's definitely going to be the starter. He's better than Sam Darnold. I would have liked to see Sam Darnold get a chance somewhere, just because I do think he's got talent. I think he's been kind of screwed over by every single coach he's had, and they've really messed them up. So someone may not be able to unlock that potential. It's been 4 years.
He's going into his 5th year.
Yeah. So is that too many years of kind of being messed up where it's unfixable?
Yeah.
I don't know. He did show some glimpses at the beginning of the season last year and then kind of went into old habits, and Rule kind of screwed him by had him running the ball. But it'll be interesting to see. And I think I like Baker a lot more than you do. I think he's a winner. But I also don't really trust Matt Rule. So I think Matt Rule kind of stinks. So we'll see. What do you think?
No, I think I'm still surprised that only the Panthers were the only team interested in Baker. Like, I know I'm not big on him, but he does have potential. He was a 1st overall pick. He was Rookie of the Year, and he had crappy coaches with the Browns. I'm just surprised that no team really took a flyer on him, where the Seahawks, for instance, maybe they really believe in Drew Lock, but you could trade a 5th or 6th round pick for Baker, see how he does, and maybe you found your quarterback of the future. So that's why I was surprised no one really went after him. I'm not a big fan of him. I don't think he's that good. I think Matt Rule's also an awful coach. So I think he's just put in a situation where he's bound to fail, but it's better than being a backup for Deshaun Watson, at least. So he at least has a potential to show. Then this also goes a little bit onto Jimmy G, where if I'm the Panthers, I'd rather have Jimmy G than Baker. And it depends on what you have to give up to get him. It depends if the 49ers are still holding out for a 2nd round pick, then yeah, I'd rather trade a 5th round pick for Baker and just take my chances. But I'm surprised no team has really gone out for Jimmy G either.
I'm pretty surprised too. I wonder if really what the trade compensation is still too high. We heard the 49ers were really seeking out a 2nd round pick or 2 2nd round picks back in draft time. You clearly see what other teams have gotten for quarterbacks that are not top tier ones this offseason, and it hasn't been high. You look at really the Baker one, I think that's a pretty fair comparison. And Baker's doesn't have a torn ligament or tendon or something in his shoulder like Jimmy had. It was on a separate shoulder. It wasn't his throwing shoulder. So with Baker getting that little in compensation, and then the Browns actually having to pay for him, the 49ers are not getting what they want. So if I were really the 49ers, I'd probably keep him, because I don't think Trey Lance is the future. And I could be wrong, but everything I've seen of him, I don't think, and we know what Kyle Shanahan thinks. He's not a big fan of him.
Yeah.
He's also not a fan of Jimmy. So it's not really, it's pick your poison there. But if you're not getting much for him, I'd rather just keep him rather than getting a 5th or a 6th round pick. But to do right by Jimmy, if that's what they really want to do. If I was on the team looking for a quarterback, I'd definitely want him. Seattle, I would take him. Hell, another team that has a quarterback that's not like right, maybe even the Lions. Everyone knows how I think of Jimmy. I think he's soft. I think he's a winner. And I really think Kyle Shanahan messed him up. I think he was on an upward trajectory with the Patriots, and I think you could see that in his first year with the 49ers. And then he kind of steadily digressed, and you could kind of really see Shanahan did not have any faith in him. And he kind of kept slowly putting him in positions where he tried not to fail, and you end up failing. When you're trying not to lose, you lose. And he put that same mentality in with Jimmy. So I really like Jimmy. I think he's really soft, but I think he's a winner. And if you're really wanting to take that risk, or you're really near quarterback, what other quarterback to take than Jimmy? So interesting to see there. Moving on, Deshaun Watson. We've talked about him at nauseum over this offseason on our podcast, on the podcast that we've joined. Really no update other than the NFL was looking for a minimum 1 year suspension of an indefinite suspension. It's with the judge. I can't remember her name right now, but that's not really important for this conversation. What are your really expectations? What do you think is going to happen? No one really knows. We've seen anywhere from 2 games to no games to 8 games to a full season. So no one knows what's going on. So what are you hoping he gets?
I think he should get at least 1 year. It's not like I know some people are giving the comparison of Ben Roethlisberger got 4 games, but Ben Roethlisberger's accusation, I think only one accusation, maybe 2 or 3,
Mhm.
but this is 23 to 26 women of the same exact repeated allegations.
Mhm.
Granted, it is civil suits and it didn't pass criminal grand jury, but it's still accusation after accusation. I don't know how you can't suspend him for at least a year with that many accusations. Just a quick comparison: Trevor Bauer, for one accusation, got 2-year suspension in the MLB. Granted, that's a whole separate issue. There's a lot of issues going on with that whole suspension that led to the 2 years versus everything. But I don't know how you give Watson 2 games or 4 games or 6 games. One person I trust in this area is Michael McCann, who says the only person that has any idea what the judge is thinking is the judge herself. So you can't believe any reports you're hearing, because from any side, they really have no idea what the judge is really going to decide.
Mhm.
So I'm not believing any of the 0 games, 2 games, 4 games until I actually see the suspension come handed down.
Yep, I agree completely too. I think at minimum he should get a 1-year suspension. And like you said with Roethlisberger, there's I think 1 or 2 women. Then it's also years later, and
Yeah.
the NFL has done a horrible job with domestic violence with women accusations, and they really need to take this seriously. And again, this isn't really this is kind of out of their hands right now because it's in the judges is being the arbiter right now, but
Yeah.
and she's not really the one to decide what's best for the NFL, but Goodell does once if he gets at least 1 game suspension, so he can always override everything, which I hope he does
Yeah.
no matter what it is. Even though I despise the man, but I think to really show that you're taking this seriously, and to show that they won't tolerate this, it has to be at least 1 year. And it wasn't like it was 1 or 2 or 3 different women; it was 23 different women saying the same exact story. If you read that Sports Illustrated article, that's what really sold me. At first, when I saw 10 people coming out, and you see the lawyer that they have, Tony Busby, it looks like a kind of a kangaroo court sort of thing where he's all outlandish. It seems like he's in it for the money, but you hear these stories one after the other, all the same. And the Sports Illustrated one, the woman didn't have anything to gain from this. She wasn't suing him, and just the acts, the disgusting acts that he goes through. And this is a repeated kind of offense that he's taking. It's a pattern, and
Yeah.
I don't actually trust him to stop doing it. If you do it with, he had over 40 or 60 masseuses,
Yeah, over 60.
and no other NFL player has said that's normal. That's not normal, and
Yeah.
he's looking to kind of have that power over women. So I would really hope that they take this seriously, at least a 1-year suspension, and that being the end of it. I would like to see him never play again, but we'll see. Kyler Murray, new contract, really highly paid here. I think both of us will probably be on the same end of the spectrum here. What's your first thought?
The thing is, for if you're a quarterback, if you're a team and you think you have the franchise guy, that's just what the rate of. It's just setting the record for biggest contract ever, where I think it was 5 years, $230 million with 160 something guaranteed.
Mhm.
That's just what the going rate is. So if you think he's the guy, you have to give it. But the things that I don't think he's the guy. He hasn't shown it. He's crapped down his leg in big games. And B, just the details that have come out today of what's inside the contract of. It's written in the contract he has to spend at least 4 hours a week in films, like private film study by himself, which is essentially 4 hours a week of homework, which that's nothing for a quarterback. You saw how much time Tom Brady did for film study by himself. And if you have to write into a contract, you have to do 4 hours of study by yourself. And it's written in the contract that it doesn't count if you don't personally do it, or it doesn't count if you're watching film but playing video games while doing it. It's just, there must be a reason why it was written in, because he wasn't doing this. And it kind of shows, if that's the case where you have to write that in, why are you guaranteeing $166 million to a guy that isn't I think that's the behavior that shows he's not the franchise guy, let alone his play on the field in big games. But that's just my opinion. I think that it just shows that why bad franchises continue to be bad franchises.
Yep, completely agree. I think he's too small. I think he gets hurt all the time because of his frame. He's a mobile quarterback. In that point, whenever you have a quick, small mobile quarterback, they're always going to get hurt. He hasn't shown that he's able to elevate his team down the season. You see every single year they start off really strong and then they start fading away. And that's not only between him, it's also, I think, Cliff Kingsbury. I don't think he's that good of a coach.
I was just going to say, his coach also has a track history of that going back.
He was never a good coach in college. So there's really no point for him being an NFL head coach other than him being a good looking guy. So I don't really understand why he's an NFL head coach. I don't think he really deserves it based on what he's been doing. I don't think Kyle Murray's a franchise quarterback. I wouldn't be paying him that much. Like you said, if you have a franchise quarterback, the going rate is going up even more because the NFL deals that we have with the networks, they're just going to make these contracts astronomical. So they're going to have to lock up Mac next year after his third year. If they think that he's the guy, which all things are pointing to, he probably will be. So if they want to keep him in stock, he's going to have a huge contract. Maybe he might give it a little Brady discount. I highly doubt it. I don't think you're going to hit lightning in the bottle 2 times. With that type of person, but who knows? Maybe he will. Maybe he'll see what Tom did, see all the history, and maybe he'll take a little bit less, so that way they can have more around him. And like we've seen before too, quarterbacks on their big contract are less likely to win the Super Bowl than quarterbacks that are not making in the top amount. So that's just, if they're over a certain percentage of the cap, it's less likely they win. And we can put together those stats for another time, but we've done it before. So. And again, like you said, with that motivation part, having in there just tells me he's probably not that motivated. And again, going into his rookie season, he was picking between, does he want to play football? Does he want to play baseball? Maybe baseball was something he always liked more than football. And he just went to football because of the money. When you get a lot more money in football than baseball, because baseball, you have to try and work your way up to the major leagues, and then that's when you get paid. So, that could be the part too. Maybe his heart just isn't as football as much as kind of other sports.
I think that's fair. Should be interesting to see what happens to the Cardinals the next few years.
Yeah. Last point, not really much to talk about this, but two former Patriot retirements, just kind of seminal guys, Danny Amendola and Jason McCourty, kind of 2 pivotal guys in the Super Bowl for them. Amendola had some big catches. He didn't really start too strong with the Patriots his first season. Really got it through. I think it was a Bills game where he played through a whole hamstring injury, but then it was out the next few weeks because of it. And then Jason McCourty, I was never a big fan of him his last couple of years, just because I don't think he was that good. And I thought he should have been benched over some other players. But he had that really big pass breakup in the Super Bowl against the Rams. And just to kind of give him a little due diligence there.
Yeah, they just had really good careers. McCourty, unfortunately, had to spend most of his career on losing teams before he joined the Patriots. But like you said, he had the big play in the Super Bowl versus the Rams in 2018 to help win the Super Bowl. And Danny Amendola has been one of the most clutch wide receivers for the Patriots over the past few decades, right up there with Edelman, where he might not always have the big flashy stats, but when he needed to catch most and Brady looked his way, you knew he was always coming down with it. So the 2014 playoffs, 2016 playoffs, and then also in the 2017 Jaguars AFC Championship game. So,
great player. Hopefully he has some fun in retirement. He's supposedly going to some sort of announcing, so be interesting to see where he lines up. But that should wrap up our podcast for today. I want to thank everyone for joining back to us for year 2 of the podcast. And again, follow us on Instagram, Twitter at Pat's 300 Level Pod. Subscribe, rate, and review iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, any of your podcast platforms, YouTube as well. Hit us up on a subscription there. Rate, review us. We look forward to talking next time throughout this training camp as we kind of prep for the season beginning in the beginning of September. So talk to you guys next time.